We are such a mysterious soup. We're a mysterious soup of beautiful qualities and deluded qualities. And our work is to see more clearly both energies. We so rarely see our beautiful qualities. If you heard me speaking, did you hear me speaking on my phone up there? You didn't? My doctor called me with not very good news. And I've been sick for quite a while now. I've been coughing up blood and phlegm, and it's been going on, and I've been trying all these different my doctor and I have been trying all kinds of different things, and nothing so far is working, so we sort of are proceeding down the path. And I know as I say this to you that in your heart is caring, in the same way that if any one of you stood up and said, "I've gotten bad news from my doctor," our hearts would immediately open in caring. And that's one of the most beautiful qualities that lives inside of us, is our caring for each other, and especially our capacity to have compassion for the places where we see each other in suffering. And it could be as simple as someone tripping over these terrible wires that are serving a function here, and immediately all of those of you close by would jump up to help that person. Without a doubt. That's the compassion, that's the love, that's the beautiful heart that's living inside of us, that immediately, without a second thought, moves out to help another when that person has hurt themselves or is hurting themselves or is facing a physical challenge or some other challenge. And the Buddha said that it's so important to see that about ourselves, because we see it in the great teachers, and just for whatever reason I feel so struck by the story that Sokne Rinpoche, a Tibetan Dzogchen teacher, tells about his father, Nyingshol Khenpo Rinpoche, a very renowned and considered awakened being. And he said that when his father was dying, he and his brothers, all the brothers are teaching, Choki Nyima Rinpoche, Tsokne Rinpoche, and Mingo Rinpoche, and the youngest one, his name I've forgotten. Or maybe Mingo Rinpoche is the youngest. But anyway, they were all saying to their father, who clearly was dying, "Dad, you have to rest." Because he was so renowned, there was always a long line of people waiting to see him. And even when I was in Kathmandu studying with Sokne Rinpoche, and they would go down for an interview to his home from the monastery, there in the living room were all these people waiting to see him, because he was considered a renowned teacher. So Nyingshol Khenpo Rinpoche refused to listen to his sons. He said, no, people want to see me. And even though he was in a great deal of pain and discomfort, he would look out the window. His chair was by the window. He said, no, all those people are suffering, and I want to help alleviate their suffering. That movement of the heart. And so he saw them until in a break, right before they were going to give him some food, he died. Just like he saw them until he absolutely couldn't see them anymore. And he died. That generosity of giving is the generosity that lives inside of us. And it's so important on this path of being embodied in a life and in a personality, and especially in a spiritual practice. It's so important to see that. It's so important to look at how the beautiful qualities are living inside of us and acknowledge that. In the last group sharing that some of us had this afternoon, we talked about finding places of rest in our lives. And one of the places of rest, especially when we're being challenged, is to contemplate how these qualities live inside of us. And I don't just mean in passing. I mean to contemplate them. And I'm not saying this out of some kind of new wave interpretation of the Buddha's teaching. The Buddha was very specific, actually, about seeing the beautiful qualities that are living inside of us and acknowledging them and contemplating them. And there's a very traditional, complex and studied commentary called the Visuddhimagga that came 500 years after the Buddha's teaching. And that commentary encapsulates in great detail the ways that we can contemplate our beautiful qualities. And many of you have heard me speak about this over and over again. And it bears reminding because we keep forgetting. So it bears reminding that an important part of our spiritual practice is to see how these qualities live inside of us. I have said to some of you, as you have mentioned, something awful that has happened or that you've said or done. Well, did you pick up a gun today and kill someone? Today, because it might be some of us were, if we're older, fought in a war and did that. But just today, did you do that? I'm assuming no. Take for a moment and really allow that acknowledgement to help you to see how much caring lives inside of you, that that's a choice you haven't made. Because we know each one of us has sometimes been truly pissed off. As pissed off as some people who've picked up a gun. I live in Oakland and there has been a mass of shooting just close to where I live. And the most recent shooting happened when two different gang members came to the same gas station. They were filling up their cars with gas, and one gang member made a negative comment about the other gang member's girlfriend. And in that moment of rage, because his girlfriend was being disrespected, that gang member got the gun from inside his jacket and killed the one who had said negative things. In the process of shooting him, he also shot several other people who were standing close by. Now, I know that we have felt enraged when someone has said something to us that has triggered that feeling of how dare you, or like how dare you doesn't really give the right language to the feelings we've had when someone said something to us. And it's touched a deep pain inside of us. And we have felt outraged, or someone's done something and we feel outraged. That's the same feeling that gang member had, outrage. And especially, in the context of being unseen so much of the time because of racism in our culture, that when we're disrespected yet again, that outrage becomes out of control and the gun is in the hand already. That is a deep suffering. And to see the blessing, the incredible blessing that each one of us has, that isn't something that we have done. Can you see how your morality or your caring has actually stopped you from taking another human being's life? That there's something even in your outrage, even when you want to kill, you haven't. Or at least I'm speaking about myself, because there definitely has been a time when I have had the feeling of wanting to kill. And I feel so deeply blessed that even with that feeling, I haven't. Because there's that sense of integrity that's living inside of me. It is so important, the Buddha says, to see that. And to see that you haven't stolen. That you, at least today, haven't raped someone. That you haven't turned up in the Zendo high on coke or speed or heroin or alcohol. To see the beautiful qualities living inside of us, and what a blessing they are. What an incredible blessing that we have this living inside of us. Because who knows, in the mix of karma and the fact that, we apparently have been living uncountable lives, according to the Buddha, that we might have been born into a life where we weren't given support for that integrity to live. Where we were so wounded and so defended because of the wounding that there was nothing to mediate that. So to connect with these beautiful qualities, because unless we do, we can't find the refuge and the ground in then to look at the delusion that we're also carrying. So before going to the delusion, to come back to not just in general contemplating these qualities, but actually very particularly doing it. Taking in your mind at the beginning of a sit, when you were generous or when your heart felt moved, and to see the situation and to feel the feeling in your body and to replay it. The Buddha says so. And then to appreciate it when at the least, when I heard Arena saying she had bad news from her doctor, I felt my heart open. When my friend told me they had cancer, my heart opened. Just two very small examples. When I see the refugee camps of Syrians fleeing the war, my heart opens. There are many, many situations where we find our heart opens, to consider each example and to go through one after the other, after the other, after the other. This type of thinking, or what we actually say contemplation, is an allowed practice on a retreat, as against our negative storylines, which don't really bring anything but suffering. So seeing the beautiful qualities that are living inside of us, and especially when we're having a hard time, taking it as our practice. And not just taking it as a practice, but coming, and this is the kind of the juxtapositioning, it's funny, that we defend ourselves against our beauty. Have you noticed? So there's a kind of humility that's been called of us to really open up and to claim it, to say, I am a life that isn't going to be lived again, and in part, I'm beautiful. Not physically, but beautiful because I care, and because I'm generous, and because I'm practicing and want to be patient, and because I want to heal, and because I want to be kind. I'm kind, and I also want to continue to be kind. That's what makes me beautiful. And there's specific things that have happened in my life that I turn away from because somehow it feels like it hurts my heart in a way to open up to it and to become vulnerable to these places and to say, yeah, this is me, and because of that, I deserve respect. Because of that, I deserve respect. And when I say that, of course we deserve respect from each other. Of course we do. But more importantly, I deserve respect from myself. That's the most important relationship of respect, that we get to see this life we're living and how sacred it is because of these qualities and the potential that lives inside of us, in which these qualities grow forth. And because of that, and because of our efforts, I get to respect myself. I get to see more truly who I am. And out of that relationship, I find a greater stand in which to begin to refuse to believe the delusion that I've also inherited. So that's why it's so important. And the delusion that we've inherited is just the opposite. So we have these beautiful qualities. It's our Buddha nature. It's what deserves respect. And then we also are carriers of ignorance and delusion. And the ignorance and delusion are always expressed in negative qualities. That's their definition. How do we tell the difference? Because ignorance and delusion are always expressed in negative qualities. So judgment and blame. So just to go from the institutional level, just something very simple. Men are not supposed to cry. I was walking down a road at 51st and Telegraph. There were some young kids, a mixed group of kids, girls and boys, and the girls were saying to the boys, boys can't cry, they're not supposed to cry. What it is to live with that conditioning, that delusion. And the other side of it is that strong women and girls are bitches. Hillary Clinton was called a bitch. You know, strong women are put down because girls are supposed to be the weak ones and cry. Just sort of very simplistically, and how we inherit those negative messages. You know, there's something sick about queer people. Even the Dalai Lama says that gay sex isn't in accordance with the Buddhist teaching. In this particular case, the Dalai Lama is deluded. But he can't see that. So on the institutional level, the ways that we inherit negative reflections of ourselves, and then on the family level, you know, so just to say, finally warming up, thank you. On the family level, I sent my mother the first book I co-wrote, and she never said a thing. She never said, "Oh, I so appreciate that you tried writing or that you wrote a book." Not a thing. So after 6 months, I said, "So, Mom, did you read my book?" She said, "Oh, yes." I just know that each of us has had experiences like that, whether it's with our parents or at school, where we see unseen. I think I've mentioned this. I had a friend when I was at high school who came from a very working class background. And she was a great cook, and I was a terrible cook. And because I came from South Africa, I jumped into school in the middle of the school year. So I was placed in the kind of less academic streams. So we did cooking classes. So she took her scones up to the teacher, and the teacher gave her a B. And then I went to the end of the line with her scones, and I took my scones up. Now, I come from a middle-class family, and I got an A. Just what it means to inherit those negative messages, and that we take them somehow to be true. We know that. Each one of us is carrying this medley of negative messages about ourselves, from our culture, from the institutions, from our family, because of our different locations as men, as women, as straight, as gay. All of those messages are negative in some way or another. And we believe them. We believe them to be true. So from my family, I see this striving for perfection. Some of us have mentioned it. Always trying to try harder to get some kind of acknowledgement, right? Because I want to be acknowledged. And this tension that I have lived with. So, and taking that somehow to be true. The Buddha saw all these dynamics, and he named them as ignorance and delusion. And it's so beautiful because it helps us then to understand why we are in this practice, because it is our job to reclaim ourselves. And how do we reclaim? Ruby said, what is it about being sacred? How do we reclaim the sacredness, coming into right relationship with life? It's by beginning to discern both the beautiful qualities and these deluded dynamics that we have taken to be true about ourselves. That somehow, whatever we're experiencing deserves to be judged or criticized, or how we are is not okay in some way. So the reclaiming process depends on this capacity to see clearly what actually is going on. And in the seeing, when mindfulness is strong, in the seeing, it's like, that's ridiculous. I can't believe that you are believing that, and dropping it. When mindfulness is strong, it is the great purifier. It sees things and it drops them. It's like, oh, this is what's happening. This is ridiculous, and it drops it. And that is so sweet when mindfulness sees that. So I think I've shared with you just a time when it really turned my life around. I hardly ever used to smoke marijuana, but I was in love with my straight girlfriend in my early 20s, and she used to smoke a lot. So one day I'm sitting on her bed. She always smoked before she went to sleep. And she says, "Here, do you want a toke?" And I took a toke. I know you're not supposed to say this in Dharma talks, but I think it's okay. I took this toke, and I looked at her, and I saw this thought: I want to make love with her. And it was the first time I acknowledged that that was the movement in my body and in my mind. And it wasn't that I hadn't kissed my other girlfriends and slept with them, but I'd never really acknowledged that's what I was doing. And as I acknowledged it, there was this incredible wave of shame. Like, oh my God, that is so shameful that I want to do it. And as the wave of shame came and passed away, I saw it. And in that moment of seeing, just for all these different conditions, this moment of grace of, I have a choice. I don't have to believe it. I saw it. I saw. I don't have to believe the shame. And in that moment, I made the choice not to believe it. And it was so beautiful because honestly, since then, and they're just these times, I have never felt shame about being queer. Since then, I just feel that it's a beautiful blessing. I mean, sometimes I'm not always so comfortable about saying it, but I don't feel shame around it. That's the power of awareness and mindfulness when it's strong in its purifying element. And that's what the Buddha spoke to in the Eightfold Path when he talked about right effort. And he said, abandon what's unskillful. Abandon the unskillful energies. Even when you've been taught it's shameful to be queer, when you see it, you have the capacity, and this is not only about queer, you know that I'm just using it as an example. It's about any part of you or any experience that you have, to see it and to let it go. But we have to see it to let it go. So that's the power of mindfulness. That's why we're slogging, because it's the great purifier. It keeps on seeing what's unwholesome and letting it go. If mindfulness isn't that strong, then we can resort to the contemplation. I know this feels to be true, but the Buddha said that the story around shame is never true. So I can challenge that belief. That's the second. That's the what do you call it? The backup. That we take as a mantra. That's the mantra. The stories that we have that keep negative qualities in place are never true. So, you are living a lie? Yes. Yes, we are all living lies. Because delusion is by definition a lie. It's the opposite of truth. And what's keeping those in place are the stories, not the feeling, the stories that hold them in place. Being gay is shameful. That's very, very common and alive in some parts of our queer culture. So certainly true of being trans or being cross-dressers. I told that story of the young kid wanting to wear the pink dress. The shame of that. So just to know it, because as we talk about it, to know it, we can begin to challenge it. And we know that we are held by these chains of lies. It's good just to name it. And it doesn't make us failures. It's acknowledging what the Buddha said, which is that we have ignorance and delusion living inside of us. Backing up one more is to accept that. Because if we don't accept it, we can't turn towards it. If we can't turn towards it, we can't see it. If we can't see it, we can't renounce it and let it go. Turning towards the places and accepting them. Of course, the places that we carry of the deepest shame or anxiety or confusion or aversion and hatred or guilt or whatever, conceit, doubt, of obsessions, of craving, of addictions, whatever our thing is, of course they're there. No shame, no blame. Of course. I can't remember I think it was maybe in the Sangha, wasn't that? We were talking about the tension of liking people and not liking people. I sometimes used to wake up with my ex, and I would say, I just hate everyone. I'd wake up and I hate the world and I hate everyone. She would wake up and say, God, what am I doing today? What's happening? She was deluded, I was aversive. That, no shame. That is what arises sometimes, So it's like, of course, this is how it is. And it's in that capacity to acknowledge it that we heal. No shame, no blame. This is how we heal ourselves, is to turn towards those places. And not only to turn towards them, like in in some kind of mechanical way, but really to open our hearts to them. This is what it is to be an aversive personality. That I see the negative a lot. There's a plus side to it, but the downside is I'm like, no, people, that is how it is. And so I get to open to it. I get to open to it and say, oh, this is how this lives in my body. And all the concomitants with that tension of, and I think we all feel it, but maybe aversives feel it in a particular way. On the one hand, of wanting to be intimate, I want to be intimate and connect with you all, of course. And then at the same time, I'm like, stay away, stay away. Have you felt that? It's like, yeah. And so on the one hand, we're like lonely. Oh, I feel, it's like I'm keeping everyone out there. And then on the other, we're like, oh, but don't come too close. I mean, so, or the other side of it, I have a friend who I love and adore who's greedy, and, we'll like make a date, and she'll say, oh, but look, let's invite so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so. My aversive is like, no, but she's like, yeah, let's hang. She's like greedy and aversive, so everyone is attractive, It's great. It's like, and so a date with one person is never enough if you're greedy. You're like always wanting more and more. That's also suffering, because it's never enough. Hey, listen, when we act out our deluded expressions, there's never a good outcome because it's always deluded until we turn towards it and allow it. And in that recognition and allowing, the dynamic loses a little bit of its fire and energy, and it becomes more and more a shadow in the ways that it plays out. It's there, but it stops being able to grip us. And that's the beauty of mindfulness. That's why mindfulness is the agent of freedom. Because it allows everything to play out in the environment of understanding what's true and what serves us, and what isn't true and what builds suffering, what doesn't serve us, what creates the dis-ease and distress in our lives. So that's the beauty of mindfulness. When we allow the way ignorance plays out in our relationships and in the world, because we allow it inside of ourselves, we can navigate the relationships. So I'll tell you one last story. There was a lot of abuse and trauma in my family, and I was the eldest one. And so for quite a few years, for 6 years, my younger sister, who I loved and adored, said she didn't want to relate to me anymore. She didn't want to have a relationship with me. And she wrote me a letter where she poured out pages and pages of what an awful person I was, how selfish I was, and all these other things. And for years I didn't actually quite know how to hold the letter and what to do with it. We weren't in communication. Our whole family never got together. I knew my work was to open to and hold my grief, my anger, my outrage that I was being blamed for something that I actually felt had to do with my parents, and it was being displaced on me because it was safer for my sister to hate me than my parents. And then one afternoon I was riding on a United flight from Pennsylvania to San Francisco. It was a long flight. I was going through my old emails and I came across her letter. This is 6 years later. And I saw that really she just wanted to be loved. That her letter, underneath her letter, she just wanted to be loved. You know that Mark Nepo poem that all we want to do is to unglove ourselves so that we might feel life and feel love. And so I could write to her and I could say, I'm really sorry that the ways I've loved you haven't served you. And I wonder if you would be willing to tell me how I can love you so that it works for you, how I can care for you in a way that works for you. I saw her own pain, and the only way that I could see her pain and her need for love was because I saw my own. And because I could hold my own pain, I could hold hers. That's the power that we have with mindfulness, to hold what's happening so that we can navigate the world. That is the only way we can navigate delusion and ignorance in the world. The only way is to meet what's happening inside of us in such a way that it becomes clear, because we've met ourselves, what is most skillful for bringing peace and reparation in the outside world. That's the agency that we have. And that's why this practice is so revolutionary, because we're using ourselves, and by healing ourselves, or not even necessarily healing, but by opening and accepting everything that is hard inside of ourselves, we find then how to hold and navigate what is hard outside of ourselves. Yeah? So I wanted to say that in response to our question and answer session of inside, outside, ourselves and others. We can't do it. We can't do it unless we're doing the work inside of ourselves, because it's that connection that helps us to see what needs to happen, that inner connection outside of ourselves. So let's see, what story do I want to read? There's a lovely story that I like to read, especially because it's about some of you have heard this before. Well, let me actually stop there and just sort of check in with you. Does it make sense? Are you, yeah, what I'm saying? Yeah, yeah. You're tracking it. Any questions?
One comment is, yay, this is good news. Touchdown.
That's great.
I have a little question.
Yes.
Like with your sister, for example, it was 6 years. So let's go to the 5 3/4 years where you weren't dealing with your sister. That even if you understood you got undiluted about your own grief and outrage, but she didn't want to deal with you. What did you do with that? How did mindfulness?
To hold the grief. To continue to hold the grief. And you know, thank you for saying that, because I wanted to say, if it was a one-time effort for more, you know, the kind of koan of hurt that each one of us lives with, that there is an underlying koan of ignorance and delusion that we each live with, in that sort of very underground place that needs healing. It doesn't just heal one time over. You know, so with my sister, it would come up and it would require this turning towards it and meeting it and allowing it, and watching myself go into the storyline and dropping the storyline and coming back and watching myself go into the storyline being, look, my family is coing her and they're all seeing each other and I'm not included, and you know, all those things. I have to drop it and come back and meet my outrage and rage and grief over and over and over again, until at some point it just it's not so operating anymore. It wasn't the predominant energy anymore. That doesn't mean that it wouldn't come up again if something came up, because now we're in connection and it's very sweet. I would have to go through it again. And we talked about that in our Sangha meeting on Tuesday, that it's ongoing, that we think when we've touched one place that that's it, like, oh look, now I found love with my sister and now we're meeting. And no, we're like a diamond, and one part gets polished, but there are all the other parts that need to be polished too. So forget it if you think you are going to do one big major healing and you're not going to have to do any more work again, that you found it and that's it. That's delusion. You will work until you die. You will work until you die. That is how it goes. The Buddha meditated and did intensive practice until he died. So does my teacher. So does everyone I know. You will not stop working. That's the good news, because the Dharma will grab you and you'll see. You have to just keep on doing it and doing it and doing it, because mindfulness and love get so strong inside of you, they won't allow us to stay blind and defended. And so we think, oh, the practice isn't working, because how come I'm sitting and I'm feeling some old trauma all over again? How come I'm feeling that? Oh, no. Yeah, we just keep going deeper and deeper. So when we first came to practice, right, we thought it would just get easier and easier, right? I mean, in some way it gets easier and easier because we become more skillful. But in terms of content, no. That's the good news. Yeah. So that's so beautiful, because why we venerate people like Aung San Suu Kyi and the Dalai Lama, for example, and Nelson Mandela, just, or the Buddha, is because they never stopped. They didn't just stop at some point and say, oh, I'm giving up. That's why we venerate them, because there was that deep faith in their own beautiful qualities, that understood that by continuing to be disciplined in their efforts, and it wasn't that, oh, I'm going to make a huge contribution in the world, because I know, at least for Aung San Suu Kyi and Nelson Mandela, they had no idea, but that they were called to keep on practicing because love and wisdom called them to it. And they knew that in dire situations they could not afford not to. And we could say that about our planet right now, that we are actually in a dire situation. And that we cannot afford not to. So both on a personal level, our hearts are calling us, but the earth is also calling us. She desperately needs us, and we don't know how our work contributes to healing until we've already done it. So that's okay. So now we've passed the time for that story. Let me just say it's a lovely one of my favorite poems to end with. Last night as I was sleeping, I dreamt marvelous error, that a spring was breaking out in my heart. I said, along which secret aqueduct, O water, are you coming to me? Water of a new life that I have never drunk. Last night as I was sleeping, if you're so lucky as to sleep, I dreamt marvelous error, that I had a beehive here inside my heart, and the golden bees were making white combs and sweet honey of my old failures. Last night as I was sleeping, I dreamt marvelous error, that a fiery sun was giving light inside my heart. It was fiery because I felt warmth as from a hearth, and sun because it gave light and brought tears to my eyes. Last night as I slept, I dreamt marvelous error, that it was God I had here inside my heart. Let's sit for a moment. So let's take a let's take 20 minutes. Who's the bell ringer to bring us back? Thanks, Sue. Let's take 20 minutes, so at 10 to ring the bell, and then we'll do a guided loving kindness meditation to end our day together. Thank you for your listening. Thank you.